The florist had just finished arranging the last bouquet of the day. The sun had already set, and the street outside her small shop was quiet, with only a few people passing by. She was about to close the door when she noticed a boy standing just a few steps away. He looked small against the fading light, his clothes a little worn and his shoes scuffed as if they had walked too many miles. In his hand, he held a single coin, gripping it tightly as though it was the most precious thing he owned. At first, she thought he was only passing by, but the way he stared at the flowers through the glass told her otherwise. His eyes didn't have the casual glance of a stranger. They held something deeper: hope, longing, and a quiet sadness. Curious, she opened the door and called out softly, asking if he was looking for someone. The boy shook his head, stepped closer, and admitted he wanted to buy flowers. His voice was polite but uncertain, almost as though he expected to be turned away. She bent down slightly so she could meet his eyes and asked who the flowers were for. His answer came quickly. He wanted them for his mother, who was very sick. He said it with such honesty that it struck her heart like a gentle blow. He looked down at the coin in his hand and whispered that it was all the money he had. It wasn't nearly enough to buy even the smallest bunch in her shop, but the way he spoke made her realize this wasn't just about flowers. It was about love. The florist felt a warmth inside her chest. She thought about how many customers walked into her shop every day without appreciating the meaning behind the blooms they bought. Some picked roses for a sweetheart, some bought lily for a friend, and some chose bright tulips for their home. But here was a boy with nothing, willing to give all he had just to make his sick mother smile. That single thought made her eyes water. Instead of telling him the truth about the price, she gently took the coin from his hand and slipped it into her pocket. She told him to wait for a moment while she prepared something special. Inside, she carefully selected the freshest flowers: soft white daisies, a few roses, and sprigs of baby's breath. She tied them together with a ribbon, making sure it looked as beautiful as any bouquet she had ever sold. Her hands worked quickly, but her mind was filled with questions. Who was this boy? Where had he come from? And how could someone so young carry such responsibility? When she handed the bouquet to him, his eyes widened with amazement. He stared at the flowers as if they were the most magical thing he had ever seen. Then he looked back at her with tears forming in his eyes. He whispered a thank you, his voice trembling, and clutched the flowers close to his chest. For a moment he didn't move, just stood there holding the bouquet as if it carried more than petals and stems. It carried love, hope, and the kindness of a stranger. The florist smiled softly and told him to take care of his mother. She didn't ask for his name, nor did she expect him to come back. She thought it was just one of those brief encounters life throws your way, the kind that warms your heart for a little while and then disappears into memory. But something about the boy stayed with her. The way he carried himself, the respect in his words, and the quiet strength in his eyes were not something she would easily forget. The boy turned to leave, but before stepping onto the street, he looked back. He said one sentence that made her pause. He told her he would never forget her kindness and that he would return one day. His words were simple, yet they carried a strange weight, like a promise he truly meant to keep. Then he disappeared into the night, the bouquet still safe in his hands. As she closed the shop that evening, the florist found herself unusually restless. She replayed the moment in her head, the way the boy's voice cracked when he mentioned his sick mother, the way his eyes lit up when he saw the bouquet, and the way he promised to return. She wondered what kind of life he lived and how a child his age carried so much responsibility on such small shoulders. She had seen many customers over the years, but none had touched her heart like that little boy. She sat down by the window, staring at the empty street outside. The coin he had given her rested in her pocket. She pulled it out and held it in her hand. It wasn't much, just an ordinary coin, but in that moment, it felt like a treasure. To him, it had been everything. To her, it became a reminder that sometimes the smallest gestures could carry the deepest meaning. That night, as she prepared to sleep, she couldn't help but wonder if she would ever see him again. She told herself it was unlikely, that life had a way of bringing strangers together only once. But deep inside, a small voice whispered that their paths were not finished yet. Something about the boy, his honesty, his quiet strength, made her believe their story had only just begun. The next morning, the florist unlocked her shop as usual. The air was fresh, and the faint smell of blossoms filled the little space as she arranged the flowers in neat rows. But her mind was not on the roses, daisies, or lily in front of her. Instead, it drifted back to the boy from last night. She found herself wondering if he had made it home safely, if his mother smiled when she saw the bouquet, and if the boy had eaten anything more than a small piece of bread for dinner. The thought tugged at her heart. The day went by as normal. Customers came and went, choosing flowers for birthdays, anniversaries, or apologies. Yet, no matter how many people she helped, the image of the boy's tired face and hopeful eyes kept flashing in her mind. She could not forget the way he had promised to return one day. But promises from children often fade like chalk in the rain, she told herself. Still, she couldn't stop hoping. Later that evening, as the sun began to sink and the warm glow painted the street in gold, she noticed a familiar figure near the corner. Her heart gave a small leap. It was him. The boy was sitting on a small bench, holding nothing this time, just sitting quietly as though waiting for something. She stepped outside, wiping her hands on her apron, and called to him. His head lifted, and when he saw her, a shy smile spread across his face. She asked gently if he was all right, and he nodded. But she could tell there was more to his story than just a simple nod. She invited him inside the shop, offering him a seat near the counter. At first, he hesitated, looking down at his shoes as if unsure if he belonged in a place so full of brightness and life. But eventually, he followed her in and sat carefully, as though afraid he might break something. The florist poured him a glass of water and placed a small sandwich in front of him. His eyes widened, and he shook his head quickly, saying he didn't want to trouble her. But she urged him to eat, telling him it was no trouble at all. With soft hands and a kind smile, she reminded him that kindness was meant to be shared. Slowly, he picked up the sandwich and began to eat, his small hands trembling slightly. She could see he had not eaten properly in a long time. As he finished, he began to speak in a low voice. He told her his mother was very sick and often couldn't get out of bed. He said he worked small jobs, carrying groceries, running errands, anything that people would pay him for, just so he could bring home food and medicine. He admitted that the coin he had offered for the flowers was the only money he had saved that day. Listening to him, the florist felt her eyes grow heavy with tears she fought to hold back. She looked around her shop, filled with beauty, color, and the sweet fragrance of flowers, and felt a sudden pang of guilt. She lived simply, not richly, but she had a roof, food, and health. Yet here was a child carrying burdens heavier than most adults. She wondered what kind of strength lived inside him to carry such responsibility without complaint. The boy's voice trembled when he said he didn't want his mother to feel forgotten. That was why he wanted flowers. He believed flowers carried happiness, and he wanted her to feel happy, even if only for a moment. The florist couldn't help but reach across the counter and place her hand gently over his. She told him that what he was doing was more precious than anything money could buy. His eyes filled with emotion, and he lowered his gaze, embarrassed but grateful. From that moment, she felt something shift inside her. This was no ordinary boy. He carried himself with quiet dignity, and though his clothes were old and his life was hard, his spirit shone brighter than many she had known. She realized she wanted to help him, not just with flowers but with anything she could give. The evening grew darker, and she walked him out to the street. Before he left, she handed him a small bag with bread and fruit. He tried to refuse, shaking his head, but she insisted until he accepted it. He thanked her again and promised he would return soon. Watching him walk away, clutching the bag with both hands, she felt a strange sense of purpose fill her heart. That night, as she sat by her window once again, she found herself replaying every word he had spoken. His honesty, his sense of duty toward his sick mother, and his polite nature struck her deeply. She whispered to herself that this boy was not just passing through her life. Something about him told her their stories were tied together, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the world was preparing to reveal something extraordinary. As the stars filled the night sky, the florist closed her eyes and silently prayed for the boy and his mother. She didn't know his full story yet, but she felt sure of one thing: this was only the beginning. The next few days passed quickly in the florist's small shop, and she soon found herself looking forward to the boy's visits. At first, she wasn't sure if he would return again. Children like him often drifted in and out of lives, swept away by struggles no one else could see. But one morning, as she placed fresh roses in a vase near the window, she heard the soft sound of footsteps outside. When she turned, there he was, standing shyly by the door. She greeted him with a warm smile, waving him inside. He stepped in slowly, his eyes darting around the shop like he was stepping into a safe haven. This time, he carried no coin in his hand. Instead, he offered her a little grin and asked if he could help her arrange the flowers. Surprised, she nodded and handed him a bundle of daisies. With careful fingers, he began placing them in a glass vase. His touch was clumsy at first, but there was something sincere in the way he worked. The florist watched him for a moment, her heart softening. She realized the boy didn't just come to buy flowers anymore. He came for something more: comfort, warmth, and the kindness he lacked outside. She encouraged him to visit whenever he liked. The boy's eyes lit up, and for the first time, she saw a spark of joy in him that replaced the sadness he usually carried. Day by day, he began to spend more time in the shop. Sometimes he swept the floor, sometimes he helped water the plants, and other times he simply sat and watched her create bouquets. He never demanded anything in return. In fact, he often insisted that he just wanted to help. To the florist, it felt as though she had gained not only a helper, but a little companion who brought unexpected peace into her daily life. In those quiet moments, the boy began to share more about his world. He told her stories of his mother, how she loved the smell of fresh flowers, how she smiled whenever he brought something colorful home, even if it was just a wildflower he picked from the roadside. He spoke with pride about how he tried to cook for her, though most of the time the food was simple and plain. Listening to him, the florist felt both admiration and heartbreak. This child, with so little, carried himself with such strength. The more she listened, the more she admired his character. He never complained about his life. He never spoke bitterly about what he lacked. Instead, he spoke with hope, with love, and with determination to do his best for his mother. The florist realized that this boy had more kindness in his small heart than many grown adults she had met. One afternoon, as they worked side by side, the florist noticed something unusual. The boy spoke about places he had never visited, but the way he described them sounded too detailed, too vivid, as if he had seen them before. He mentioned large gardens filled with rare flowers, grand houses where sunlight streamed through tall windows, and halls decorated with chandeliers. His words made her pause. She wondered how a boy who lived in such poverty could describe such luxury so clearly. She wanted to ask, but she held back, sensing he wasn't ready to reveal everything yet. Instead, she smiled and encouraged him to keep talking. His voice carried a calmness that filled the room, making the shop feel alive in a new way. She began to look forward to those stories, even when she didn't fully understand them. There was a mystery in him, and she felt her heart telling her that the boy's life held secrets waiting to be uncovered. Customers soon noticed the boy too. Some smiled at him, charmed by his politeness, while others simply nodded as he helped carry bouquets to their cars. He never complained, and he always thanked the florist for letting him stay. To her, he became more than just a helper. He became part of the shop's heart. One evening, as the shop closed, the florist gave the boy another small bag of food. He looked at her with gratitude, but also said softly that one day he hoped to repay her. She chuckled, shaking her head, and told him kindness never needed repayment. But inside, she felt something stir. The way he spoke carried a tone of certainty, as though he knew a time would come when he could give her back far more than she had given him. That night, as she locked the shop and walked home, her thoughts lingered on him. There was something about the boy that didn't quite fit the life he described. He carried himself with dignity, with words too wise for his age. She wondered if destiny had brought him to her for a reason, and though she couldn't explain why, she felt her life was slowly changing because of him. As she lay in bed, the florist closed her eyes and pictured the boy's smile, the way his small hands had arranged the flowers with care, and the way his voice carried both sadness and hope. She had no idea that the mystery surrounding him was far greater than she imagined. The truth of who he was and what he carried within him was something that would soon stun her beyond belief. For now, though, she only knew this. Her kindness had given the boy a safe place, but the boy had already given her something more, a renewed faith in the power of small acts of love. The days turned into weeks, and the boy's presence in the flower shop felt as natural as the scent of roses that filled the air each morning. The florist had grown used to seeing him sweep the floor, water the plants, or carefully tie ribbons around small bouquets. He seemed happier now, more at ease, though his eyes still carried quiet depth that told her there were stories he wasn't ready to share. She respected that silence and never pressed him. On one bright afternoon, when the sun lit up the shop's window display, a stranger appeared. The florist noticed him immediately as he stepped through the door. He was tall, dressed neatly in a dark suit, and carried himself with confidence. His eyes scanned the shop carefully, and though his expression was calm, there was urgency in the way he looked around. The florist greeted him politely, but before she could ask what he needed, he asked a question of his own. "Have you seen a boy?" he said in a firm yet gentle voice. He would be about this tall. He raised his hand to indicate the boy's height. "He has dark hair, and he may have been wandering this part of town." The florist froze for a moment. Her first instinct was to protect the boy. She didn't know why, but the sudden appearance of this stranger made her cautious. She asked carefully why he was looking for the boy. The man's eyes softened as he explained. He said the child had been missing for some time, and his family had been searching desperately for him. Her heart raced. Missing? She thought of the boy's tired shoes, his soft stories, his quiet strength. Could it be true? She tried to read the man's face, to see if he was telling the truth, but before she could decide, the sound of small footsteps echoed from the back of the shop. The boy appeared, holding a little bouquet he had just finished arranging. His eyes widened when he saw the stranger, and the bouquet nearly slipped from his hands. The florist glanced between them, sensing something unspoken pass in the air. The man's expression broke into relief, and he stepped forward quickly, calling the boy's name, not the name the florist had ever heard, but a full name that carried weight and familiarity. The boy froze, clutching the bouquet tightly, as though it were a shield. For a long moment, he didn't move. His eyes flickered toward the florist, as if asking silently whether he should trust this man. The florist's chest tightened. She realized then that the boy had never told her his real name. She had never asked, and he had never offered. Now hearing the stranger speak it with such certainty, she understood why there had always been a sense of mystery around him. Florist cleared her throat and gently asked the boy if he knew this man. The boy lowered his gaze, then slowly nodded. His voice was soft when he finally spoke, saying that yes, he knew him. The man's shoulders relaxed, and he knelt down, trying to meet the boy's eyes. He told him that his family had been worried sick, searching everywhere, and that they were ready to welcome him back home. The florist's heart pounded. Family, home? This wasn't the story she had imagined. She thought of the sick mother the boy always mentioned. Was that part true? Or was there something he had kept hidden all along? Questions swirled in her mind, but she stayed quiet, not wanting to overwhelm him. The boy stepped closer to her, almost hiding behind her side, as if he still needed her protection. The florist placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. She could feel his small body trembling, torn between two worlds, the safe haven of her flower shop and the life he had run from. The stranger, noticing the bond between them, softened his tone even more. He assured the florist that the boy was not in danger. He explained that the boy's disappearance had caused great distress to many, and that the family would be grateful for her kindness in taking care of him. His words were respectful, yet his eyes carried something more, a silent acknowledgement that she had played a role in something much larger than she realized. Still, the florist couldn't shake the unease in her heart. She looked at the boy, searching his face for answers. The boy looked back at her with wide, uncertain eyes, as if pleading silently for her to understand. He gripped her hand tightly, and in that moment, she realized he trusted her more than anyone else in the room. The florist bent down slightly and whispered softly, asking him if he wanted to go with the man. The boy hesitated, then finally whispered back that he was scared. Her chest ached at his honesty. She smoothed his hair and told him gently that sometimes people who cared for us might surprise us, but that she would not let anything bad happen to him. The man remained patient, waiting quietly as though he understood the boy needed time. The florist could sense there was truth in his words, but also something bigger, something she wasn't being told yet. She didn't know what it was, but she could feel it hovering in the room like an invisible weight dot as the boy stood there between them. Bouquet still clutched in his hands. The florist realized her life was about to change forever. She had thought she was helping a poor child in need. But now, with this stranger's arrival and the truth pressing at the edges of her mind, she understood that the boy's story was far from ordinary. Something astonishing lay ahead, and soon, the stunning truth would be revealed. The shop grew silent after the stranger's words, the kind of silence that carried a weight too heavy for the room. The florist's heart thudded in her chest as she looked from the man to the boy, uncertain what would happen next. The boy still clutched the small bouquet in his hands, his knuckles white around the stems. His wide eyes seemed to beg her not to let him go, as if the flowers were his last piece of safety. The man lowered his voice and spoke again, this time with patience. He said the boy belonged to a family who had been searching for him for weeks. They had feared the worst, worried he had vanished forever. Then he added something that made the florist's breath catch. The boy wasn't just part of any family, he was the heir to one of the largest business empires in the country. The fortune behind his name was one most people could only dream about. The florist stared at the boy in disbelief. Her mind raced back to every small moment, every word he had spoken, every story he had shared. His descriptions of grand gardens and halls filled with chandeliers suddenly made sense. They weren't just dreams or things he imagined. They were memories. She realized then that the quiet dignity she had always noticed in him had come from a life very different from the one she thought he lived. Still, none of that mattered to her in that moment. All she saw was the same boy who had walked into her shop with one small coin and a heart full of love for his sick mother. She turned to him, kneeling down so her eyes met his. She asked softly if it was true, if he really came from such a family. His lips trembled as he nodded. He admitted in a quiet whisper that he had run away because the world around him felt too heavy, too full of people who cared more about money than love. He said he wanted to find kindness, something real, and that was when he found her. The florist's eyes stung with tears. She reached out and held his hand tightly, telling him he had nothing to fear. She promised that the kindness between them was real and would never change. no matter what name he carried or how much money was tied to it. For a long moment, the boy stayed close to her, clinging to her warmth as if it was the only thing keeping him steady. The man in the suit watched quietly, his expression softening as he saw the bond between them. He told the florist that the family would be forever grateful for what she had done. He explained that they had searched everywhere, worried day and night, but it was her kindness that had kept the boy safe and given him comfort when he needed it most. The florist nodded, though her heart ached at the thought of letting him go. Finally, the boy turned to her and whispered that he didn't want to leave without her, knowing how much she meant to him. He told her she had given him something no wealth, no empire, no fortune could ever provide, a true sense of love and belonging. His words broke her heart open in a way she could never have imagined. The florist hugged him tightly, telling him that he had given her something just as precious. She explained that he had reminded her of the power of small acts, the beauty of giving without expecting anything in return. She told him she believed he would grow up to be someone who carried kindness into the world, no matter the weight of the fortune that awaited him. When the moment came for him to leave with the man, the boy turned back one last time. With tears in his eyes, he held out the bouquet he had made earlier. He placed it in her hands and whispered that it was for her this time, not for anyone else. The florist's hands trembled as she accepted it, her heart swelling with pride and sorrow all at once. As he stepped out of the shop with the man, the florist stood by the doorway, watching until they disappeared down the street. The little shop felt strangely quiet without him, almost too still. Yet in her hands, the bouquet glowed like a symbol of everything he had left behind: the trust, the love, and the bond they had formed. Word spread quickly afterward. People in town learned about the missing heir who had been found, and about the florist who had unknowingly sheltered him with nothing more than kindness. Soon, more customers began to visit her shop, drawn not only by the beauty of her flowers, but by the story of the woman who had given without asking. The florist never sought fame or fortune from what had happened. She simply returned to her daily work, arranging flowers with the same care as always. But deep inside, she carried a memory she knew would never fade, the memory of a boy who walked into her life with a single coin and left behind a bouquet filled with gratitude. Every time she looked at the flowers in her window, she thought of him. And though she didn't know when or if she would ever see him again, she believed their paths had crossed for a reason. The truth of his identity may have stunned her, but it was not his fortune she cherished. It was his heart. And that, she knew, was the most valuable gift of all.